So I wanted to make one more video about the importance of highlighting and contouring, just so that you can really see the difference that it makes when we do add highlights and shadows onto our face, because I think a lot of times when you're just using like regular makeup, it's not as easy to see because the colors aren't as extreme most of the time. But when you go for colors that are like non-traditional skin tones, like in this one I'm going to use purples, I think you can see it like a little bit more clearly. So this is just a quick exercise that I like to do to kind of help people really understand why we highlight and contour, why it's so important, and hopefully if you didn't see that before, this will help you now. So what I usually do for this is I have people cover like their entire face in like an unnatural color. So I'm gonna go with purple, and I'm just gonna use cream makeups for this. And what I'm going to do is I will have you cover like your entire face with it, and then what you do is you only highlight and contour half of your face, and then you can really see how flat the half without any highlight and contour is. And the reason I like to do this, especially for teaching like theatrical makeup, is that I think a lot of times some people think that maybe they don't need to put makeup on when they're on stage. They don't really understand like how flat their appearance could look when they're on stage. So doing something like this, I think it really kind of like drives that point home, and it makes it just a little bit more clear, and a little bit, it's like a stronger visual, I think, than when you just use skin tones. So just to make this a little bit faster, brush. And two, this is also just a good way to get people to kind of learn how to use cream makeups if they're not used to using them. So you can either apply it with a sponge, you can apply it with a brush, any way you can get it on, and then you want to just kind of even it out. I'm not going to do my neck for this, but obviously if you were going to be doing a full makeup and the person's face is purple and their neck is going to be seen, you would want your neck to be purple as well. Okay. And so to blend it, you can just kind of use little like tapping motions and little circles. That's what I usually tell people if they're unsure. And then we want to go ahead and put this on the eyes as well, so that everything is just very, very purple. And so the goal is to just kind of cancel out any like natural shadows that our face has, so that way we're all just like one solid color, which is essentially what you're doing if you were just putting on foundation and you're going to go on stage. You're basically just canceling out all like the natural colors that we have in our face, because even if you are not wearing any makeup, even without makeup, we have like these natural shadows and highlights and things going on. So as soon as you cover that with just a foundation, like yes, you might be color correcting everything, but what happens is you are really like flattening everything, because you're removing any kind of natural highlight and shadow, any kind of like natural color that you have, and you really want to make sure that you bring that back so that your features don't get lost when you are on stage. I'm just going to try to get in there a little bit more. Not the most perfect application in the world, but really for this one, you're really just looking for the general idea. If you make little, like if you're ever doing anything with like a more colorful makeup and you're having a hard time getting it even, sometimes if you do like little X's, and even with your regular foundation too, that can really help you kind of even it out. My lighting is probably going to be a little weird in this one, as my power is actually out, so we are using sunlight and a ring light in order to try to do this. So we're kind of racing against the clock here with this one. And for this exercise, you don't need any kind of setting powder, but just if you were ever going to do something and you did have to paint yourself purple, if you don't have a purple setting powder, that's a time when you would really want to make sure that you're using one that's colorless, just so that way you're not distorting or like altering the color in any way. So what we're going to do is we're going to leave this half of my face with no highlights and shadows. We're just going to leave it solid purple, and then on this half we're going to go in and just add in our regular highlights and shadows. So I usually start with my shadows, no matter what kind of makeup I'm doing, just because I think it's a little bit easier to see. And so I'm just going to go in and kind of frame my face out with just a deeper shade of purple. And I always tell people that you can kind of like apply things however, and it's all in how you blend it out. So I usually just kind of get the makeup on there, and then I come back and I blend it once I have it kind of like mapped out where I want it to be. So you know that you want to make sure that the cheeks have good definition. And I usually tell people for any kind of like just corrective stage makeup, if you just kind of frame everything out, for most people that's going to be fine. If you are ever doing like an unnatural like skin tone or something like this, I really think it's important to do the nose, just because without any kind of shadows on the nose, you're just going to have like, for this, I would just have like this giant purple area. So we'll go ahead and kind of do the whole thing. Otherwise, that's going to be kind of an odd effect. But basically, anywhere that you would highlight and contour with normal makeup, we're going to do with this one. And so I think it's also, this is a good way for anybody who's like learning how to highlight and contour, because sometimes when you're using unnatural, when you're not using unnatural colors, or using just like beauty colors, it's harder to see where those colors are because they're skin tone and they might blend in more easily. But when you're using something as like vivid as purple, or if you're doing green, pink, whatever, I usually let people pick whatever their favorite color is, and kind of go with that. It just becomes, it's a lot easier to see a color like this and to understand like the placement of it and the blending of it, because it's so vivid and there's such a strong contrast. So I think this is also just like a really good way for people to kind of learn about highlighting and contouring too. So I think it could be like a good intro exercise for anyone really. And you could do like, you could do this with like powder highlight and contour. You could use it with paints. I'm not as big of a fan as using paint, like the water activated paints, but you could certainly do that if you prefer. And remember, the goal is to not have super bright lights, it's to not have like really strong lines. You just always want everything to be really nice like shadows or blended lines. So again, so for my forehead, I shade my forehead a lot because I have quite a large forehead, but you would want to do whatever's appropriate for you. Again, I like to do my shadows first just because I have an easier time seeing shadows than I do highlights. So for me, it's always easiest if I lay down the foundation, so I've got my mid-tone on there, and then I shade it, so that way I kind of like carve everything out, and then I can go back in and add my highlights. And that way too, I feel like when I do it, the highlights help to blend everything as well. And on the chin, I'm going to make sure I give that a little bit of shape. And then on the nose, what I usually do is I just like pull it down and then kind of blend it like into like the eye makeup. So it doesn't have to be super intense, and you really do have to be careful because you can make your nose look very, very crooked if you're not careful. So definitely watch out. And for the eyes, you can even come in and shade a little bit, especially for people that if you don't have any like eyeshadow or anything, but you want a little bit more definition, you can certainly use your cream makeup. You just have to make sure that you really set it, especially on the eyes, because that's an area where it's a little bit more prone to creasing and like rubbing off, just because our eyelids, a lot of people's tend to be like a little bit oilier. You can also come in and just further shade here, because we just want to make sure that all these little parts of our face that we kind of lost come back. You can shade around the lips if you want to. Great. And again, you're just really trying to bring back this definition. I also think this is like a fun beginning exercise to do in classes, because it's also like a good way to kind of like, I feel like, get to know your students or get to know whoever you're working with, because you can see like what colors do they pick, like what kind of style are they doing. It's just like a good kind of intro into makeup, I think, especially for stage, or if you're learning even like effects, like fantasy makeup, even like beauty makeup too. Like I said, I just think it's easier when you're using these extreme colors to kind of like understand where things go if you're not sure. And then I'm just going to come in with white. So I could mix up like a lighter purple if I wanted to, but I'm just going to come in with white where I need to highlight. And basically anywhere you have a shadow, it's going to need a highlight to go with it. We'll do like above the eyebrow. We can go right under my eyebrow. And basically this is just going to help pop all these shadows and make them a little bit more prominent. And again, this could be happening with your like beauty like highlighters and like beauty shading colors and things. So all the same things that we're doing with purples and like pinky colors, you could be doing with your regular like contouring and highlighting colors. I think this also helps for anybody because sometimes we are in shows or we are doing like fantasy makeups and you do have to have like unnatural colors, and I think sometimes people get scared about that because it seems like it's so much more intense and so different, but really it's the same process as anything else. So hopefully you can't hear all the construction noises in the background, but I apologize, maybe they're fixing the power and that's where that noise is coming from. But you can kind of see as I am blending this, it's kind of really helping to pop everything. It helps pop like near my eyebrows. You really could do all of this with like a sponge too, like you can see that I'm doing. For a lot of people, that is all that they have. They don't have tons of theater makeup, or they don't have tons of brushes or things like that. They just have what they need for that specific show. So you can certainly use like the bare minimum and still make these things work. And then you pretty much would just go like, you can use this as blush even if you want to, depending on what you're doing. But really, using creative colors is just like using your regular beauty makeup colors. You can see, so we like didn't do a ton of shading on my nose, but it's still enough to where it pops it a little bit and it doesn't just make my nose look super flat or anything. And then if you wanted to, you could bring a little bit of color like back to the lips, and that would help, because that's something too, is that sometimes when people put foundation on, they don't realize how much like powder and makeup will get onto their lips. So it definitely makes a difference if you go in and you add just a little bit of color. So even if for some people, if that's just like a tinted lip balm or something, it's going to be better than, and obviously don't touch other people's faces with your hands. But yeah, if you just have like a little bit of color on the lips, that's going to be better than if you just leave it skin tone, or at least like, if nothing else, wipe the foundation back off. Because if you don't do that, then you're just going to have this kind of like nothing right there. And since they're talking and emoting on stage, you want to make sure that your performers, the mouth should be like a central place to focus. You don't want that to get lost in the rest of the makeup. But as you can kind of see, so I'll kind of try to turn here. So this is our side with all of our shading and highlighting versus our side that doesn't have any. So you can definitely see like on this side, like obviously if I was on stage, you'd be able to tell that I was purple. But when we come back here, the further away you get, you see my cheekbones, you get all my shadows, especially against such like a dark background, you're able to get just kind of more of an idea of like what the actual shape of my face is. Like I have pretty high cheekbones, so when I talk, you can kind of see the shading, but certainly this side it's a lot less intense. So I guess with the colors I have, if I was gonna be like Ursula or something with this makeup, a lot of it would get really lost if you just send somebody on stage purple. But by just putting a little bit of color on there, and it doesn't have to be with creams, it can be with eyeshadows, blushes, that's really gonna help kind of make the makeup come alive. Obviously you could do like your whole neck, hands, everything, but even just this little bit of shading around the eyes and the face and the lips and the nose really does make a difference. And hopefully that helps highlighting and contouring make a little bit more sense if you're confused on it, or it gives you an idea of like an intro exercise or something that you could do. And hopefully the next time you have to highlight and contour, you will be a pro at it, and you'll actually understand a little bit more why it is so important for us when we are going on stage.